So, Jim, you've been watching and you've been listening and chatting to people. What's your take so far on some of the important priorities for Meadowbrook as we move forward to create this health and knowledge precinct?
Yeah, thanks very much, Amanda. Amanda and I both grew up in Springwood, so I feel like we're not far from the old stomping ground. It's good to see so many people here who care about the future of Meadowbrook. The sentiment that I get today as I eavesdrop, frankly, on some of the conversations, but also from spending a lot of time here on campus and the hospital and all of the other institutions that we have in Meadowbrook, is that everybody recognises that we've got so many things going for us here, but maybe we're still just a little bit underdone, and that's a really useful sentiment to have, I think, because that fires you up to make the most of all of the things that we have here in Meadowbrook. I spend a lot of time with communities around Australia, and generally when you sit down with people like yourselves from the other kind of big growth corridors in Australia, they say, well, look, what we'd really like as a starting point is we'd like to have a TAFE based here, or we'd like to have a hospital or a uni or a headspace, a train station, whatever, and we've already got all of those things here. And so we start with the most extraordinary advantages, but the key for us, and I'm sure most of the tables were talking about this, certainly the ones that I was listening in on before. What we really care about is the linkages between them and how we really squeeze maximum advantage out of them. From my point of view as the federal member here, working closely with Linus Power, the state member for Logan, and councillors who are here, John and Russell and others, really my main focus is how we get the main kind of employment opportunities whirring out of a great place like Meadowbrook. How we get the workforce part of it right, how we soak up as many young people as we can from our community working, especially in services and more particularly in the health services. And the state government's done a great job with the health hubs at the schools like Maple Park and others. They've done some extraordinary things there. So our interest at the federal level is how we make sure that we're investing in the parts of the training system and the education system which can churn out an assembly line of terrific graduates who can work in health here in Meadowbrook, and I know a lot of you are interested in that as well. But in the terms of specific policy, we've spent a lot of time consulting on how we make sure that the barriers between TAFE and university are less substantial, not just physically, and I know that there's some physical constraints here in Meadowbrook, but also in the way that people think about their own education. Obviously, it's not enough for a young person to finish grade 12, to think about 3 or 4 years of study, and then that's all of the further education that they do in their life. They're going to have 17 different jobs and 5 different careers on average. So we need to care about how people move more freely between TAFE campuses, uni campuses, at-work training and all the rest of it, so that we get that lifelong learning piece done really well. And I was thinking about this 3 Tuesdays ago. I was at the Logan Hospital in the pathology area there. And one of the things that really jumps out at you there, and there's probably people from the hospital here, is when you hang out there, you meet people who've got a certificate level qualification from the TAFE all the way up to PhDs from the universities. And that's a really good example, I think, of the opportunities really at every level of education if we get the health stuff here right in Meadowbrook. So that's my main interest, Amanda. I could go on, but that's the main thing I care about in this conversation today.
That's excellent. Thank you. I'd like to ask a question to start with, which is from our experts, we know what you think, but I'm more interested in what you heard. And if my question to you is, what did you hear that excited you? And what I'm saying to you is not your own idea, we're assuming they excite you, but an idea from others. What ideas did you hear that excited you?
The creativity that was coming out, I think I managed 3 different tables, and I think there were some really creative solutions. So I think people were thinking differently about some of the problems. So we were talking about one of the groups over there was connecting Meadowbrook to Shayland Park. And there was a really interesting discussion about this is a very short distance that is currently a horrible journey. What could you do to actually make that a very easy journey and, being a health professional, a healthy journey? So we talked about different ways, whether it be bikes, whether it be driverless electric cars, minibuses, there was walking, there's a whole range of things that you could do to make that a very easy, accessible.
Excellent. And presumably some of those things can start immediately?
Totally.
Excellent.
Yeah. They don't have to be big, complex
Great.
solutions.
Bernard?
Well, the riveting idea that I heard was steering committee. The reason why I thought it was interesting is because a project like this is a 30-year project. And with due respect to the politicians in the room, they can only give certainty over 3 years, 4 years. In fact, you need people in this room, in this community, that will put their name and their career and their reputation on the line for a decade. That is longer than any term of office from any administration. I do want to see a steering committee or an advisory board or whatever it is, headed by people who live here and who want to put their reputations against this, and to bring in the appropriate minister or politician or whatever it is at various points throughout that. If you don't put local people's name, reputation and career against it, it'll just flail off into the distance.
Fantastic. I feel like that's a challenge issued to people here in the room. Kerrianne?
Thanks, Amanda. I think I didn't actually hear the word vitality, but it was certainly very vital throughout the whole discussions. And I think vitality in terms of integration and vision, and a real passion that this is an area that is going places and that it is here already, but it's just getting that integration that seemed to be the theme around. And I'm a Rochedale South girl myself, so it was fantastic to hear all that passion and vitality in the room.
We're about to do a reveal of what you've come up with, which I'm ever so excited about. In moving through those tables, was there a challenge that you saw and you thought, actually, this is incredibly difficult? I mean, we've got to be honest, it's not all roses and cupcakes. There must be some thorny things.
Revitalising the city centre, if you've got Logan Lee Road, is it? Right slap bang down the middle? That's hard. Do you move the road? Do you put an overpass? I mean, there's a physicality issue here that is very hard to navigate. I saw that as a real roadblock. Maybe I'm just not thinking laterally enough, or I haven't got the right skill set, but I thought that was really, really hard.
I know we're all being very positive and creative, but there is an image issue, I think, around the area that if you want to attract talent you want to bring families and skilled professionals in, as well as change what this area is known for, then that's going to have to be addressed as well. And there's going to have to be a major campaign, I think, to address those issues. So we know what the strengths are, we're hearing them all, but we have to tell everybody else, and that will need to be packaged up, I think.
The silos of land uses, and yes, there is a level of integration, but they're difficult to get between. And there's an integration in terms of uses and types of ideologies, I guess, between those uses, but they still are silos and independent silos, and getting people and workers in between each of those is challenging.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. That would have been the one that I said. The other challenge, obviously, is competing priorities, not just within Meadowbrook, but competing priorities throughout our city and more broadly. All the levels of government, all of the businesses, all of the service providers in the room are used to weighing up the opportunity cost of one investment over another. And so what we need to get really good at, and why Bernard's point about the steering committee is so important, is it is a zero-sum game in lots of ways, and every dollar that we invest in Meadowbrook is a dollar not invested in Beenleigh or in Springwood or Logan Central or further afield. And at the national political level, those challenges are very acute. We had a big barney to get the money we needed for the M1, for example. We all know how important the M1 is to Meadowbrook and to the city more broadly. But you're competing against the Bruce and the Gateway and East-West in Melbourne and all of those sorts of things. So I think really the biggest challenge for us is to tell such a compelling story in all of the forums that we are part of, that this is a higher priority than where those investment dollars might otherwise flow.
There's one other point I'd like to make. This idea of changing the character, the way it's viewed, I think is really, really important. And I think you can actually do that through a program of showcasing people who have completed that social transformation. And I can cite, I'm not sufficiently au fait with the example in Logan, but I can cite an example from Melbourne, for example, Broadmeadows, a similar sort of locality. And you might not agree with the person I'm going to cite, but Eddie Maguire, he will proudly talk about being a Broadie boy. Ahmed Fahour. Again, you might not like the example I give you, but the examples are these people wear these places like a badge of honour. Who are your stories of social transformation? You can come from here and you can do that from this crucible, if you like. That to me is something we need to celebrate and actually show that it is possible. Create that ambition in the local community. To me, that's a terrific opportunity. Just back to this steering committee. The reason why you want a steering committee there with a single individual there for 10 years is because when there is success, someone can say, that's because of me. You actually need to have that sense of ownership to it rather than, it was that funding or it was this person's idea. People have to own it.
Excellent. I'm going to say thank you. I feel like we've received a pound of flesh and more from our experts. And so would you like to give a round of applause?